Welcome to Missions Monday with Pastor Brent Oliver from Delphi First Assembly of God and Kokomo Southview Church. Today, we are blessed to share with you God's news of what is going on in various parts of the world.
Well, hello there. This is Pastor Brent Oliver from Delphi First Assembly of God, and welcome to Missions Monday. Today, I have with me Nathan Turney, who has been a missionary that we have supported for probably close to 25 years or so, as you have been in various places around the world. Welcome, Nathan.
Thank you. Honored to be here with you, Pastor Brent.
Would you take a couple of minutes and tell us about ministry as has been for the last number of years? Then we'll transition toward where you're heading.
Yeah, you bet. We've been working in Asia Pacific for this is our 26th year, and we started in Thailand, and then have over the years have worked through a collection of countries as we directed a ministry that had pretty broad scope and scale, variety of countries that just targeting kids that have been orphaned, abandoned, vulnerable, impoverished communities. And then now God has us on this crazy new ministry trajectory, headed as the First Assemblies of God World Missionaries to the secularized island of New Zealand. And we're going to be doing an international multicultural church plant in Auckland, which is the largest city, 1.6 million, very ethnically diverse, very cosmopolitan, kind of very strategic for the country and for the Pacific Oceania region there, with commerce and trade and education. And so we're just kind of venturing out on a whole new direction that God is leading us for missions engagement in Asia Pacific.
So in New Zealand, tell us, don't assume we know anything. So tell us about New Zealand and what's the atmosphere? Yes, spiritually, of course, but what's the, when spiritually there is what we might call darkness, then that begins to reap a lot of other things in a country. So tell us about New Zealand.
Sure. Well, to be honest, when God began to redirect our attention to New Zealand, it was quite a shock. All of our ministry had been in the undeveloped world, Cambodia, Philippines, Indonesia. These countries, when you see them, they just resonate missions, just with the compelling physical needs that are there, and obviously the spiritual needs also. And so when God began able to bring New Zealand onto the radar for us, it was quite a shock as God began to open doors. Because generally, what first came to my mind, isn't that where you go for vacation? I mean, you think about New Zealand, you think about majestic mountains, you think about lovely coastlines, fjords, and kind of that tourist bucket list. And indeed it is known for some very lovely scenery. A lot of people go there for tourism, especially on the South Island. We'll be on the North Island where Auckland, the Metroplex area, is there. But to kind of give you an idea of the spiritual climate of that, as God opened doors, we had multiple ministry engagements there to the coronavirus shutdown as God was redirecting our focus and attention there. What we found is that New Zealand is very similar to Europe in that Christianity was prominent in the past. It's a former British colony. The first inhabitants were descendants of the Polynesian explorers. So there's this very large Polynesian culture that's there, the indigenous Maori, they're called, and then a collection of immigrants from all over Pacific Oceania. New Zealand is a part of Pacific Oceania. It's the southernmost country of the Polynesian island of collections and of what we call on the globe, the Pacific Oceania area. It's 100 miles across the Tasman Sea from Australia to New Zealand, one of the closest countries in Antarctica. So you got this very large Polynesian culture that is there, from Samoan, Tongan, Fijian that have immigrated in addition to the indigenous Maori. But interestingly enough, the majority of the people, 60%, are European descent, from it being a British colony from the early 1900s up to about 1947 when they got their independence. And so this fusion that takes place culturally from this Polynesian influence and this British European influence, and then a very large Asian community that's immigrated from all over Asia Pacific, Philippines, Thailand, Cambodia, mainland China, a whole collection of Asian groupings that are there. But spiritually, they have moved kind of lockstep with Europe where over the last 20, 30 years, they've embraced secular atheism as a dominant worldview. And over half the population reject religious connections of any kind. The Anglican Church is still the recognized national church, but it is symbolic. It's historic. It's not relevant in their lives today. So those that would have a real relationship with Christ would be a very small percentage, single digit, maybe low double digits. There's a growing elements of Islam that are there. It's one of the fastest growing elements there. Asian religions are on the rise. But those that would have a real relationship with Christ are a very small percentage, unfortunately. And we know that when you attempt to extract God out of the equation of life, which was what atheism does, it just causes a great deal of devastation. Broken hearts, broken homes. They have issues of domestic violence. It is a first world nation, so economically there is more stability. But spiritually, you have this stark contrast. You've got a land that has beautiful scenery, but in contrast to that, spiritual barrenness. And so one of the sad statistics is, like with the teenagers of the developed nations, statistically, it has one of the highest teen suicide rates of any developed nation, twice that of the United States. So you can have beautiful vistas, beautiful views, but never fill that God-sized void in the human heart. So it's an Asian nation, Polynesian type of culture with the British influence, but ideologically, spiritually, it's very similar to Europe in that it is majority, very secularized. Atheism is a dominant worldview. So that gives you kind of the picture of the spiritual climate, history, and the current state of the country.
Okay. Again, maybe explore just slightly more in the sense of when there's a rejection of Christ, then all of a sudden we begin to see in a people, in a society, you talked about, they're still pretty affluent, but it's like you have all these, the majestic scenery, you have affluence economically, but yet a personal hopelessness.
That's right.
Domestic violence, more than in most places, or what do you see there?
I haven't seen the exact statistics, but I just anecdotally, just talking with various individuals, that is an issue that's pretty prevalent. You're going to have high levels of depression. Obviously, that's going to play into the suicide rate that is there, and you just creates that spirit of despondency. We know there's hope, there's purpose, there's meaning in the Lord, relationship with Him, being connected to our Creator. To give you kind of an idea just of that progression that they're moving. Last fall, they just legalized euthanasia. So they're one of the few handful of countries around the world, the globe today, that have legalized euthanasia. And so it is just that devaluation of human life, the value of an individual, and just embracing that idea that there is no creator, there is no God. We're the captain of our own ship. And that's fine in a sense when things are intact, when we've got in the refrigerator, when we've got a job, when we've got somewhat of our relationships intact. But we know that life throws all kinds of things at you. And whenever you face that issue that is beyond your control, that is outside of your ability to fix, suddenly you're hopeless. And just that's where the depression slips in, the despondency, relationships begin to unravel, and then you are just facing a roadblock with that. So,
kind of sounds like America.
Very similar, yes. You're going to have a lot of common elements as far as the percentage of those that have embraced secularism as an atheism as their philosophy and their life. They're further on down the path than we are, but you're absolutely right. We are quickly moving in that direction. We've seen that breathtaking pace increase over the last decade. We're on that same path of self-destruction that they are. They're just a little further down that line there. And like I said, New Zealand is not anything that we would have ever imagined. We knew God into our hearts that there was a new direction of ministry, a decade that was coming, and I'd sensed that it was going to be back in pastoral ministry and community engagement and outreach. And when he brought New Zealand onto the scene, with it being a first world nation, that just was a different ministry context.
Sure.
But God was just so clear with the doors he was opening, just the miraculous things that he was putting together. We just thought it was a hand of the Lord for us to focus on this new direction of ministry and embrace this new opportunity for a church plant in Auckland. And we know church planting is an extremely effective tool and tactic in sharing Christ to the community and winning people to. And so we're just excited to go into a new area, establish a new beachhead on the battlefront, carve out a new community of Christ, and just see God do what he does best, transform lives. We've had
Absolutely.
over the years with the compassion type ministry, seeing God do dramatic things with, kids that have been rescued out of human trafficking, these shattered lives, and how God put the pieces miraculously back together. Just amazing stories of the transformational work of the Holy Spirit in individual life there. Going to communities that were just devastated and seeing God restore families and create communities of Christ and plant churches. And so we've had the joy of seeing him do that so miraculously over the years. We know he's just going to continue to do that in this different ministry context that has a little more influence economically and has some beautiful scenery around it, but still has barren spirituality that we are so familiar with in the context of community that we've engaged in over the over 2 decades.
Awesome. Well, we trust the Lord will continue to bless your life and your ministry and reaching out to people in this new venture. Be excited to hear in the days ahead just what God is doing. Prayers for you that God will help you to raise the rest of that budget. The doors will open for you to get over there and see his work done.
Indeed, and we're so honored to be a part of your missionary family. We know that missions is a team effort. I mean, we join together to share Christ with the world, and only through the prayers and the support of our partners in ministry. And so our perception is we're just a ministry extension of you guys out in Asia Pacific. And so we're honored to bear the name from Delphi, Indiana there, simply just to be able to be your extension to the lost in that very far distant land of New Zealand.
Very good. Well, Nathan, I appreciate you spending time with us today, and we'll just see what God has in store in the days ahead. God bless you.
You also. Blessings. We're praying for God's blessings on you guys there in Delphi.
Thank you so much.
This has been brought to you by Delphi First Assembly of God and Kokomo Southview Church. To contact us or send us your prayer request, testimony of answered prayer, or Bible questions, please see the information on the screen. May God's salvation through Jesus Christ overflow into your life with his joy. God bless until we see you again.